You're listening to the Propane Fitness Podcast, your ultimate resource for fat loss and muscle gain, with none of the gimmicks. With your hosts, Yusuf and Johnny. Simple rules, dramatic results.
Simple rules, dramatic results. With your hosts, Brian and Johnny. With your hosts, Kenneth and Johnny.
What are we going to talk about?
Well, this is...
What are we going to talk about?
Let's go on Evernote. Right, so we've got periods. That's a big topic. And fuck. Training while...
Recently, we have bought 2 new microphones called Snow Cone. What are they called?
Dildo.
Dildo 1 and Dildo 2. What are they actually called?
The problem is they're very dildo. And I use that adjective quite deliberately. Yes, dildo is an adjective. No.
As of today.
Yeah, so if you've heard our last episode with Andy Morgan, you'll see that he recommended us to buy a better microphone and not this grey thing that's in a cardboard box. So we took his advice. We bought a dildo.
So 2 dildos. Since we've been doing these podcasts, Yusuf's fully immersed himself in the world of sound editing. And so he's now become an absolute sound snob. So if he listens to anything, like a CD, he's like, oh God, listen to the background hiss on this. They're clearly using a Cardioid 952 with a B plus sensor on. And we've just been recording this for the first piece of the intro, was recorded using his laptop microphone, which he paid no additional money for. Played it back to me, and he was like, see, fantastic. Like, listen to how brilliant this is. Aren't you glad that we invested all this money in these 2 dildos? And turns out that it was with his laptop. So I referenced him to the idea. I don't know whether this actually happened. It's just one of those things that I have in the back of my head, where they gave wine testers. Does this ring a bell?
Double blind test with wine testers.
Posh wine and cheap wine, and they couldn't tell the difference.
I'm so embarrassed. I'm just the wine tester.
You're the guy that no one likes at the party.
Like, oh yeah, this is a Byzantine with a really oaky...
When someone's giving like an announcement at a wedding, using like a microphone and speaker, you're like, God, listen to that. Listen to this jugger, he's got his microphone on.
Hasn't even got a
Bidenoid.
Hasn't got a pop filter. What a dick. Yeah. Hopefully you guys can leave us a review on iTunes and let us know if you think
just talk about the microphone, not the content, just the microphone.
I love the Propane Fitness Podcast because it's silky smooth audio quality. I can't understand what they're saying.
Or what they're talking about.
I don't even speak English.
They've done well to craft that sentence up to that point if they don't speak English. That's apparently the best way to not have a conversation with someone in a foreign country. Or even anywhere. In the UK, someone asks you a question. Terribly sorry, I don't speak a word of English.
Best response. And then if they say, well, you clearly do, say, no. I just learned that sentence in preparation, just in case.
And then
you must be mistaken.
But what? They say, but what about that sentence?
And I say, well, I've preempted that, and I've learned that sentence too. And then you have an infinite recursive loop of questions going back and forth saying, but what about that one and that one?
At that stage, easier to learn English, I think.
Well, you're halfway there by that point. So
you've learned an infinite number of permutations of sentences to combat objections that you know or don't know how to speak English. So, welcome to the Propane Fitness. What number is it? 43? 44.
44, okay.
No, I don't know.
I don't think it is.
Every single time we have this.
That's because Johnny made us start recording before we even knew what we're going to talk about. Right. Andy Morgan, 43. Andy Morgan Part 2, 44.
So
This
45.
will be 45.
That's right, there is an Andy Morgan Part 2. Is that going to be released after this?
Before this.
Damn it.
So, if you haven't heard it, go back
Go
and
back,
listen to it. It's
listen to
fantastic.
it. Listen to Chris Williamson Part 1 and 2 as well.
We had some of the best feedback for that episode.
Ever, yeah.
We've had 2 for strength maintenance on a cut, training and diet modification, volume reductions in training, what kind of interventions would you make? Darren, basically, training while on a cut, I've had issues with strength loss.
Callum asked that as well.
Fine, so we've got 3 requests.
Let's do that.
Can you shut the door, actually? You probably needed a harder push. Yeah. RPE 6, maybe.
No, that would have been 7.5.
Really? Where 10 is blowing off the hinges.
I don't think I could. Because
Well,
of the
'cause
wind
you're on-
resistance.
You're on a swivelly chair as well, so you
That's
probably
true.
move in an equal direction. I'd have to
Are we
brace
recording this?
Yeah. I'd have to brace myself against the wall, and then hold your legs steady.
So we're discussing whether or not, while sat on a swivelly chair with wheels on, I could push a door off its hinges. I don't think even if I was bolted to the floor, I could push a door off its hinges.
This all comes back to being an audio snob of we need to shut the door so the resonance of the room is fine.
Seriously?
For the podcast. Yeah.
What about like the fact the cupboard door's open, like the clothes will absorb the sound?
Oh god, cupboard door. That's going to need shutting. It's because there was a wasp in that cupboard before.
That got
See,
you.
the plot thickens. And now I can't.
And now you can't move.
Right.
He's done it.
There we go. Right, now everyone's going, oh,
It won't be long
it sounds so much better now.
before we can't afford to do anything because we've invested all of our money in like making a soundproofed room in the middle of nowhere so that we can go and record a podcast.
So I read the other day
Oh
that
my God.
towels are better than professional sound blocking foam. So all we need is loads of towels. Just staple them to all the walls.
Where did you read that?
I don't know.
Audiosnobs.com.
So
Did you email admin at Audiosnobs and ask them how to soundproof your room?
So we normally start the podcasts with some embarrassing story about me. So I feel like just to turn the tables today.
Oh my God.
Johnny went to see a neurologist a couple of years ago.
Oh my God.
And the neurologist asked him, I want you to push me as hard as you can.
Yeah.
Testing his upper limb strength. Johnny said, are you absolutely sure?
So, alright, this needs more context. So at the time, so what happened was, I was getting, I've just hit that off there, it's going to be so bad, that sound, isn't it? So,
He says as he continues to do it.
in fairness though, that won't be a problem, will it?
It's got foam on the bottom of the dildo, so it blocks some of the sound, but
So not only do we have a dildo, we have a dildo with foam on one end. Fantastic. To absorb the sound.
yeah, great.
So I was getting headaches, I was getting like colours in my vision. It'd been happening for quite a while. I got literally sent round everywhere, like 2 GPs. Went to A&E, which I didn't even know existed. Did you know that existed?
Intensive emergency. No,
No.
I-A-and-E. Immigrants emergency.
Accident and emergency for eyes.
Oh, okay.
YES spells yes. What did? So in A&E, and they were like, "We can't help you. You need to go see a neurologist. It might be migraine related, etc." This is going to be a long story, if we do the full thing.
What, to say that
Because there's also the protein thing, which is quite funny.
Well, go ahead.
All right. So,
So you went to A&E, referred to the...
can I finish writing this text message?
Okay, while Johnny's writing his little text message...
I just saw it on my screen and I was like, God damn it, I didn't finish the text message. Go on then.
So if you heard one of our previous podcasts about time-saving hacks, you'll find that I disable all of my notifications.
This
on
isn't a
all
notification, in my defence.
devices. He's just had his messages open.
I was writing a message, you started recording without me knowing.
Everyone's thinking, how rude.
And here we are.
He couldn't...
Here we are. I will finish the story.
Well, I hope the person who you're responding to knows
Appreciates
that they're
it.
interrupting a podcast number 45.
I'll let them know.
Well, they'll know when they listen to it.
How will they know it's them?
Well, you're going to have to name and shame. No, never mind. So...
Go on. No, go on.
Okay, so Johnny went to A&E, referred to the neurologist, and... Well, that's all I know. He took a history. He asked him how much protein do you eat per day.
Yeah.
Johnny said 230 grams.
70.
270
It
grams.
was quite high at the time.
Yeah, that
3
is quite
times
high.
body weight in kilos.
Right. So I think he was taken aback.
I was like
by...
98 kilos in my defence. Like it wasn't that. It was within the fact. If you look in the evidence, what is a sensible range of protein? It would be upper end of that threshold.
So he just.
I was in a fat loss period as well. So.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, I'm sure. Neurologist would have been. Oh, okay, fine.
Oh, right. Yeah. The Helms et al. Research. Of course. Please continue.
So. Yeah. So to give quite a precise answer like that is a bit unusual. And he said, right, and how much caffeine do you have per day?
I forgot about that.
Which Johnny responded with 90 milligrams 3 times a day, spaced 3 hours apart.
I think at that point, probably what happened was he's writing on his notes, either mentally unstable, should be placed on watch, shouldn't be allowed to leave, all these kinds of things. But so I think part of he was testing my cranial nerve function by making me put my finger on my nose, make funny noises, all this fun stuff.
The test for cranial nerves is actually a lot of fun. Because
to do or to be...
Well, it's just making someone do a lot of really stupid things.
Yeah. So it's not fun for the participant. But
No, you have to put your tongue in their eye and then
surely not.
Finger in the bum and make them wiggle their ears.
All at the same time?
Shout at them, yeah.
Right, okay.
And then they have to say British Constitution. That actually is one. I think it's the glossopharyngeal nerve.
I don't think I was asked to say British Constitution. It's quite hard to say though, isn't it?
It is. He'd obviously isolated which cranial nerves he wanted to test.
So he's if I make him say
special
British Constitution, that's testing exactly. But if I make him say the Isle of Man, that's a different... Right, okay. So anyway, part of the test was, bear in mind, this man weighed at most 70 kilos, probably nowhere near that actually, very thin, quite short. I'm sat on the edge of a physio bed, like a hospital bed. I imagine they're standard for doctors and people like that. To me, it was just a normal bed. He sat me on the edge and did the thing with the pedal where he pumped me down to his level, so that my
I love being pumped down with the pedal. It's really soothing.
I feel a little on edge about it.
Because it's when you're about to get a haircut and it's
that's fine. Yeah, that's because you know exactly what's about to happen. At this point, I didn't.
Yeah.
So he pumped me down until my hand height was his mid-stomach. So, or did he pump me up? It doesn't matter. My hand height was at his mid-stomach. He placed my hand on his stomach. This is starting to sound a bit weird. It doesn't get weird, I promise. So my hand's on his mid-stomach, and he's right next to me, and he says, push me as hard as you can. Now, at the time, dumbbell bench was probably 50 kilos for reps.
I think you just barbell benched 170 with bum up.
Bum massively up, touch and go.
Right, but still,
yeah,
it's 170.
Yeah, it is 170, yeah. So I'm thinking, that man is going to go a long way when I do this. Asked him, are you sure? Yes. Pushed him. He went across the room, stumbled backwards.
Did you have to put your belt on and chalk up?
Belt, sleeves.
Ammonia.
Yeah. Had to have my headphones. And then, you saw the look on his face as he realised, for this to be a valid test, I'm going to need to do the other side. So, I then have an appointment with him a week later. And he goes, right, we've had the results from your bloods back. Your creatinine and urea levels are high. We need you to drop your protein intake. Now, normally, I'd advise just listen to your GP or neurologist, resident neurologist in this case, but I didn't.
I'm like, all right, coach. Like, why is that then? You're going to drop my volume as well?
So I said, like, okay, all right, mate, I'll drop my protein. Didn't at all, and obviously knew exactly how much protein I was eating, so it varied by like 10 grams at most. Came back, had another round of blood tests done, had another appointment with him a few weeks later. Fantastic, your creatinine and urea levels are in line now. And I'm sat there, I didn't mention it, but I sat there like, fantastic. Like, I beat medicine.
I beat the system.
That
a
is the
neurologist
story.
across the room.
And proved him wrong.
There we go.
And I sent my text message.
Excellent. So now we can start the podcast.
The podcast.
Right, so we've been asked.
Tired now.
Well, there's a lot of pushing neurologists around, so tiring thing to do. We've been asked 3 times by different people how to deal with strength loss on a cut. So this is something that there's 3 main factors for. We're just going to discuss that. It's going to be quite a brief podcast. So, if you're dieting and you started out relatively fat and relatively untrained, you'll be able to gain strength throughout the diet as you start to get leaner and leaner and stronger. Obviously, Johnny's looking at me and laughing.
I've just never noticed your t-shirt before. Is that a penguin?
Yeah, I was thinking about this morning. I don't know where I got this
It's
from.
Yusuf's wearing a red t-shirt with a penguin on, and the penguin is wearing like a butler's outfit with a top hat, and the penguin is carrying a vase and a meat cleaver.
So it's clearly a butcher. That's an old butcher's hat. You wouldn't be holding a vase and a meat cleaver. You'd be holding some kind of heart.
Oh, it's an organ.
An organ and a meat cleaver.
Ah, so it's a butcher penguin.
Yeah, I mean, I generally.
I don't know why. I think it's. I tell you why it is. It's the bow tie. But then I suppose butchers do wear bow ties.
That's like the 1930s classic butcher, isn't it? What other situation would you hold a vase in one hand and a meat cleaver in the other?
What other situation would there be a penguin dressed as a butcher?
True.
Here you are defending it as though it's the most normal thing in the world, removing the fact that it's a penguin and his face is in the shape of a heart.
So there's 4 different characters.
Is it a penguin?
I think it's a themed. So there's 4 different characters. Each one has like heart, spade, club, and diamond.
So it might not even be a penguin.
Yeah, maybe just the heart man.
And he's holding a heart.
Yeah.
Have you stopped recording?
I haven't stopped recording, but I'm just checking how long we've been recording. 13 minutes, and we've been rambling.
Sorry.
So yeah.
The last thing I want to mention is earlier I tried to eat a my protein pudding at Yusuf's house and asked him for a spoon. The only cutlery in the house was a baby fork and a baby spoon, and I don't mean a small fork and a small spoon. I mean cutlery designed for babies.
Smooth edges, plastic, sort of matte
like
design.
Nice colours, easy wash.
So naturally I had to film Johnny doing that.
That's probably on some media by the time you hear this. Anyway, I will stop derailing us.
So yeah, training on a cut. People losing strength, strategies to maintain performance when you're on an aggressive cut, and what diet and training modifications you might need to make to keep things moving. So first of all, when you're on a cut, obviously you're in a calorie deficit, so training recovery is lower and your energy levels are also lower. So those are the 2 things that happen when you're on a cut. The things that are maintained are your technical proficiency, and that's something that you can improve. So if you play it right, there doesn't have to be a situation where you're losing strength or losing muscle while on a cut. And in many cases, with most of our clients, they continue to gain strength throughout, as long as we do the right stuff. So this also depends on how aggressive the cut is, and there's a seesaw here, because the more aggressive you cut, the less long you have to do it, so the less time you're spending under a deficit, the less number of training sessions you have to do with poor performance, low energy. But equally, the risk of muscle loss and metabolic slowdown is slightly higher. So, any thoughts, Johnny?
Yeah.
From the start?
I was looking for a space to interject. I think people who cut quickly, I think it is possible to cut quickly and aggressively, assuming your goal is not single digit body fat. I think if you're looking to move down weight classes, for example, or drop a few kilos, I'd always favour get in, lose some weight, get out of the deficit as quickly as possible. If your goal is, right, I want to get to the point where I can see my abs, I think you want to be in the smallest deficit possible while maintaining a sensible rate of weight loss. I actually think the biggest mistake that I see people make across the board is playing with training volume. So they start cutting and they think, So I mean, I got sent a link to like something that another fitness professional said. I won't say who it is, but it was talking about like adjusting volume but maintaining intensity and different, like toying with elements of volume, load and tonnage. And my attitude is, why change tonnage? Like, why change volume load until you absolutely have to? The biggest way to ensure that you will maintain muscle and therefore strength is by creating the greatest demand possible that you can recover from. And most people think, I'll drop my training sessions, I'll use less weight, I'll do less sets. Straight away, you've reduced the amount of progress you've made over time.
So obviously this is assuming that you're starting with a sensible amount of volume and your programming is sensible.
True. Yeah.
But equally, people will, so playing with it for no reason, just thinking, oh, well, I'm in a cut, I'm in a different mode now. And people do very funky things, either increase volume massively because they think that it's more fat burning, or drop volume massively. And
as well, like, I'm going to start dieting, so I need a new program, is rationally, if you were to write it down,
I've been following a program that's been working for me.
Yeah, so I'm going to change my program. Like, probably the worst thing you can do actually is change your program when you start to diet. That's not to say that what you're doing when you're in a calorie surplus and you've been progressing for 12 weeks or whatever is going to take you through a 20-week diet without killing you. But at least for the first 5, 6, 7 weeks, there should be no reason to change it. And I think people try and pair fat loss with a fat loss program, which I think again is a false idea. I think there's no such thing necessarily. The program you want to be on is one that you would assume would lead to strength gain or muscle gain, and that's going to give you the best chance of at least maintaining your strength.
So I wrote an article about this, and the problem with changing your program as well is that you're changing your mental state, and there's a shift towards, I'm in a diet, therefore I'm going to be losing strength. And if you're in that mindset, then you're coming in the gym expecting to lose strength. You're not going to be aiming for progress or aiming for PBs. And so what happens is anything is put down to, oh, well, I'm dieting, I'm losing strength, so this is going to happen. And it doesn't have to be that way. A lot of the strength losses that someone might see if they're losing a lot of weight are the mechanical factors, which will then highlight technical complacency. So if you have a large belly, that's going to provide a lot more stability with your squat, for example, and as that drops, you're going to need to then compensate by improving your abdominal bracing to make sure that you have some pressure head to push off against with your squats, for example. So tightening that up can help recover some of that strength, and particularly if you start taking the technique side of things more seriously, and it's the best time to do that. You can get a big return on investment for improving your technique, particularly when you're dieting, because you're not going to be gaining muscle during that time, or very little. So this is the most simple way to continue things progressing.
I think that said, probably the only people that experience big shifts in their leverages or proportions are going to be people who are on the extreme end anyway. So
Sure.
If someone is overweight and really strong and they drop a lot of weight very quickly, they probably will experience an immediate change in their strength levels because, as Yusuf says, the leverages have changed. The bench press range of motion is probably greater. Squat probably feels a lot less stable. Same with deadlift. If someone is within what I'd consider like the normal ranges of BMI and they're looking to drop weight while maintaining their strength, I don't think changes in body proportion is going to be a big factor. And it'll play an impact, certainly, but that shouldn't be kind of top of mind when considering this
So
stuff.
it's something that is overstated, and the subset of people who are overweight but extremely strong and then losing lots of weight it's quite narrow.
It's tiny.
And those people, if someone is very strong and very heavy and they drop 2 weight classes, they're going to immediately become very competitive as a lifter, even if they do lose some of the strength along the way.
Yeah, they're probably moving, significant loads if it's going to be an issue for them, I would assume. I think probably the problem is, this is the idea of a fat loss program exists for profit related reasons. A lot of the media available online discusses the idea of changing your programming for fat loss so that fat loss programs can be sold, which is unfortunate because people only know what they read and what they listen to. I suppose here we are adding to that problem. But yeah, like I read countless times that you should be training no more than 3 times a week. You should be doing like 3 to 5 sets on main lifts and not much else. And I followed that for a long time and got weaker while dieting. I had recent experience of this actually at the start of this year, where I added 10 kilos to my deadlift went from 292.5 kilos to 300 kilos. My squat went from 220 kilos to 240 kilos while in a calorie deficit. Now, some of that is technique change, as you pointed out. So I switched from high bar to low bar and I changed my sumo deadlift setup. But the point remains, like even after being training for thick end of 10 years, I was still able to set up a scenario whereby I got stronger in a deficit.
So if you'd made those first 2 mistakes, if when you decided to go into a deficit, you vastly reduced your training volume or vastly increased it, or you went into that cut with the mindset of, I'm not going to be increasing my total.
Yeah.
Do you think you would have done the same thing?
Well, 100% no. So the training plan was built on a progression from the months prior with the view of competing several months later. So I almost, looking back, I didn't even think about it. It was just a plan that was discussed with my coach at the time. We built a training program to peak me for a meet in May. It wasn't like, you might get weaker, let's change the program. It's, let's just build the approach as normal, see what your weight does, as a side project almost.
One of the great benefits of coaching, and it's very difficult to get yourself out of the mindset when you're very focused on the ground level stuff. But if you can have the presence to then step back and say, over the next 12 weeks, I want to achieve this. What inputs do I require? Okay, I'll set those inputs, set the course of the ship, and then I'm not even going to worry about the output. I'm like, either the coach is going to do it for me for the adjustments, or like I'm just setting the inputs, setting the course, and then at 12 weeks, I'm going to reevaluate. That just means you can focus on giving your best input and then seeing where you're at the end of the cycle.
Yeah. I think as well, I think it's easy to almost look for confirmation of an idea. So if you're in a deficit and you have a bad session, you're going to blame it on the deficit. If you were otherwise, eating plenty of food and you had a bad session, you'd chalk it up to one of 100 other factors. But this idea of like micromanaging how training's going and missing a rep here or having to drop the weight by 5 kilos there will sometimes be enough to make someone say, right, training's not working for me anymore. I'm changing. I'm doing reverse pyramid training, or I'm doing like 5-3-1 or something simpler. Whereas actually probably all you need to do, drop a set of 2 exercises across the week, maybe at a push.
And that would come from your assistance movements first rather than your main lifts.
Exactly. I think keeping the core of, whether you're a powerlifter or not, keeping the core of the main lifts in there is going to provide the most efficient work. So it makes the most sense to leave that volume the same. Whereas
we see some people that they'll drop all of their lower body work, but they'll add in 5 sets of curls at the end of every session because they want to maintain that arm size. And it's like, well, why are you doing that? Like, you're not going to be getting bigger arms. So what you said there is another really important factor, which is training quality. And so during a diet, actual muscle loss is actually pretty hard to achieve if you're eating enough protein and if you're training. Those 2 things will vastly outweigh any micromanaging of hormones or particular training frequency or anything. As long as you have those factors in place, muscle loss will be minimal, and that muscle will be easily regained once you're back in a surplus again. So the big factor in perceived strength loss is training quality. And so obviously if you're in the mindset of I'm dieting so I'm getting weaker, that's not going to help with that. But a deficit ultimately means a decrease in performance for training. So it doesn't mean you're getting weaker, it just means that fatigue is going to be closer. You're going to be closer to fatigue, and also you won't be able to produce the same kind of performance on a given day. So if you're feeling more tired, you may not be able to accumulate the volume necessary to maintain your strength. And that's why you have to suddenly just be a lot more efficient with the effort that you're doing, not just throw in loads of extra interval cardio, because your recovery capacity suddenly becomes a lot more limited. So you've got to be more thrifty with it.
I think you can get away with a lot less with when you're in a deficit, you know, trying to train after 5.5 hours of sleep and stuff like that. You know, the margin for error is much smaller. And as Yusuf's saying, you know, even things like rushing a warm-up and stuff like that, you know, you want to be perfectly prepared for every session to maximize the chance of hitting the reps and maintaining that strength. Because if you perceive the strength as, take the mindset of, this strength is my muscle mass, if I can maintain this at all costs, that's going to give me the best chance of maintaining my muscle mass, which will result in the best result of the diet. So, I mean, it sounds like we're criticizing people who make these mistakes, but, you know, we were on that side of things for years. I think it's only really by getting it wrong that you can truly learn, but, you know, hopefully...
we want to hopefully save you that time.
Yeah, that's a kind of the crux of what we do, isn't it? Is bypassing that problem. But I think bearing in mind, you know, whenever you read, you know, like 12-week fat loss training program, you know, always consider the agenda of that kind of thing, because the reality is training is a stimulus, and if we reduce or change that stimulus, it's going to reduce or change the output, and that's the last thing we want. We want to maintain the progress we'll be making in a muscle gain phase or an off season, whatever your goal may be.
There is one more thing that being so I think I used to be very afraid of muscle loss and thinking if I'm dieting on losing any muscle, that is hard work that's going to take years to recover. And actually it seems to, the evidence seems to point towards that not being as much of a concern, in that the myonuclei density, so the density of the satellite cells in your muscles, are what dictate your maximum muscle size, and they are what then are the sort of the driving force behind the amount of contractile proteins that you can make in a muscle. So if you lose the contractile proteins during a diet, for example, it doesn't mean that it's going to take the same amount of time to rebuild that as it did the first time. So even if you lose some muscle or you lose some strength, which again, as I say, this is rare. It's normally just the perception of that from losing fullness and losing intramuscular fat as well, which can look like size in a t-shirt. But let's say even if you did lose some muscle, that can be recovered quickly as well. So if your protein is high enough and your training frequency is appropriate to your goals, then even if you lose a few kilos off your bench or whatever, then you'll be okay. And if you're finding that you're consistently losing strength in a diet, or things are really taking a turn south, it's maybe a time to think, should I be taking a diet break? Should I stop trying to push for this and see what's going wrong here? Maybe there's other stresses going on in my life that need to be addressed before I continue with this. There's no rush.
Or, you know, look at the obvious things. Where is my protein intake? What is my volume like? Training volume, that is. What are my calories at? Back to my neurologist experience, a lot of the evidence does point to higher protein intake, dietary protein intake demands when in a calorie deficit. And you can check out that research if you want. If you just Google Eric Helms and protein, I imagine you'll find that. So I think that points to around 2.8 grams per kilo as being the high end of what would be required for a dieting bodybuilder, essentially. So higher demand of protein during deficits is going to mean that if you are trying to use the same protein intake as you were using during a period of surplus, you're kind of risking something So it's a much, even if you don't believe that it's a factor, cover your bases, up your protein intake, ensure if you're dieting for a long period of time that your calories aren't stupidly low, your deficit's sensible, as little as possible. And then look at things like, how does my training compare to what my training was like prior to starting this diet? Have I made any big changes? Have I made any big increases in my training volume? And then, look at your recovery, look at your overall stress, because just as your tolerance to training decreases, your tolerance to life stresses also decrease. So if you're going through a period of exams or difficult time at home, whatever it might be, and you're piling on calorie deficit and the stress associated with that, tough period of training, and things aren't working, the scale's stalling, training volume is difficult to manage, as Yusuf says, maybe it's time, take your foot off the gas, take a break, and return to it when things have settled down a little bit.
It's not admitting failure when that happens. Sometimes it does just need a reset.
It's just being sensible.
Yeah, psychologically and physiologically. So, in summary, 5 things. Don't make changes to the volume that you can't justify when you're going into a diet. Secondly, don't go into it with the mindset of, I will be losing strength, and because that's just going to impact your attitude as you come into the gym, and that is probably going to be one of the bigger impacts on strength loss rather than what you think is causing the strength loss. Thirdly, your training quality is what determines your ability to accumulate the volume that you need to maintain your strength. So that's why we recommend things like getting enough sleep, having your carbs as high as possible to support your training quality while still being within the constraints of the calories so you can continue losing weight within your target range. Number 4, use a diet as a chance to really hone your technique. And as I said, losing weight and the mechanical factors of losing weight will highlight your technical complacency. So that's something that we need to make sure to really put a big focus on. And then you can continue that momentum and gain strength in terms of, at least gain strength on paper throughout your diet. And number 5 is just don't be stupid. Like, don't be stupid with calories, protein. Make sure that you're doing all of the other things that are supportive in the evidence of maintaining your strength and muscle. And if need be, take a break.
Just don't be stupid in general as well.
Don't be stupid in general.
That's great advice.
Great. So that is it for Propane Podcast episode 45. Please do leave us a review on iTunes if you like this podcast, or if you hate it as well. Leave us a 1-star and say, I think those guys are dicks. I listened all the way through this podcast.
The thing is, everybody always says that. Like, I listen to a lot of podcasts and everyone always goes like, leave us a review on iTunes and blah, blah, blah. And you always think like, oh, I can't be bothered. But the more listeners we get, the more likely we are to be able to continue doing this. So reviews do matter. Definitely. They do help us. And
the bigger guests we can get on, we can take on any requests. That reminds me as well, like, if there's anybody who you want to hear us being interviewed,
like David Cameron, the Queen.
Yeah, we'll give them a shout. I can text the Queen, actually. I've got her on WhatsApp.
Got her.
So
she'll send us Dave's number, I imagine.
Well, she Snapchatted me this morning.
Did she?
Yeah, so...
Woke up like this, hashtag.
Well, yeah, but it was that filter that makes you look good.
Of course. Classic Queenie.
Absolute classic. So, yeah, let us know. Just shoot us a message on the Facebook group, and on the Facebook page, rather. And also you can get show notes for all of our podcasts on the website, propanefitness.com, where you can download the episodes for offline listening. You can get the episodes on Android, Stitcher, and
you can
iTunes.
Watch the episodes on YouTube.
Yeah, you can just do what you want.
Think of any platform, we are all over it. So, and yeah, if you're driving, we've mentioned something and you think like, oh, God, I wish I could take notes on that. Don't worry, we've done it for you. Just propanefitness.com. If you sign up to our email list by downloading our free ebook, you also get first notifications. So we'll just email the podcast to you to minimize your effort.
Yep, we send emails 2 to 3 times a week, and they're usually packed with exclusive content that we don't share with people on the public facing channels. So
naked photos of Yusuf as well.
It's mostly naked photos of me, actually. Yeah.
That's what he means by packed with content.
it's one of those innuendos, you see. Cool.
To go with this dildo microphone.
So that's us signing off on our dildo microphone, dildo 1, and we'll speak to you soon.
Dildo 2. We'll speak to you next time.